Welcome back to the Keri Croft Show. You hear the cliches all the time. Life is fragile. Don't take life for granted. Nothing in life is guaranteed. But if there is ever a story to remind you to approach each day as a gift and not a given, it's Ryan Robertson's. Ryan's been an OG SOS trainer since the garage days, earning his nickname Velvet Hammer because of the gentle way he glides clients through the most challenging of SOS classes. In fact, he almost tricks you into thinking it's not that hard. On August 9th, 2020, Ryan's path intersected with evil when a random stranger shot into his car, hitting him 3 times. Ryan recounts that fateful night and opens up about his road to recovery, both mentally and physically. There's no doubt that Ryan is a survivor and the true definition of a badass, and I was honored to sit with him as he relived the unthinkable. Ryan Robertson, welcome to the Keri Croft Show.
Yeah, thanks, Keri. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, I'm just so happy you said yes to me.
Oh, I couldn't say no.
You know, this is what everybody says.
Yeah.
They're like, I couldn't say no. Do I have some sort of something about me that's a little like you can't say no to me?
I mean, short answer, yes. Yeah.
Well, should I take that as a compliment? Or,
yes,
or not?
absolutely.
Or is that something I need to work on?
No, that's an absolute compliment.
Okay, great. Well, I'm so happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks again.
We've been together for a long time now, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been about 10 years, close to.
Let's go back. Let's take a trip down SOS memory lane.
Oh, gosh.
Do you remember how we found each other?
Randomly, right? I think I got an email from, I think it was either you or Gretchen, asking about if I wanted to try this place out. And then I was just like, yeah, I had gotten in and I was surprised that, someone reached out. So I was like, of course. And I said, all right, class is at, I think it was a 5:30 class. And I didn't get very much detail as to what it was. I thought it was mostly just weights or whatnot. Come to class, I see everybody looking like specimens around there. And then I'm like, all right, so I'm in this class. And then I looked down at my mat and all the stuff that was set up for me. I was like, wow, we got some pretty small weights here. Something doesn't compute. You got some pretty leaned out people here, some people that look pretty strong. And I'm like, all right, we're doing class with these. But then I find out later it's clocked and it's with Gretchen and it's an hour worth of cardio. And I'm not a cardio guy. And I remember just after that hour, I left and the lights on the outside of that place, my head was steaming off of that and I could see it as I looked up. I was like, man, this is nuts. And of course, Gretchen gives you that evil laugh and, definitely lets me know like, oh yeah, you weren't ready for this. And I was like, I know I wasn't. I was not expecting this at all. She's like, so you'll be back. And I was like, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we get you. It's Gretchen's evil laugh and then the whatever class it is that you walk away from and you go, what the hell just happened? But I need more.
Mm-hmm.
And then next thing you know, it's 10 years later and here you are. Because I will remind you, I actually recruited you off of Facebook.
Yeah.
Because I was recruiting you for a while. I'm like, man, he's a handsome guy. And I think you were a trainer at Tidal or something.
Yeah, I was at a couple different places. So I was training at it used to be like LA Fitness then, and then I trained at another gym. I had a couple of friends that worked at Tidal, so I did some things there. So yeah, I was kind of all over the place, and then I just kind of you helped me zero in on this.
Well, so I remember zeroing in on you, and then I also remember meeting with you in the DeLaw little office. I mean, you literally are an OG. You've been with us for a really long time through your kids.
Yeah,
because you have 2 kids, and how old are they now?
Almost 8 and almost 4.
Yes.
Or almost 5 actually. Geez, yeah.
So 5. we have really just been here for a long time, and it's. I think a testament not only to you being just a loyal, good guy, but also SOS sort of just drawing people in and treating them the right way and making them feel like they're a part of something.
Yeah. No, it's been I look back on everything and I'm like, wow, it's been that long. And like, it's cool to see the growth of SOS as it's come along. And I was just fortunate to be a part of it.
Yeah, we feel the same way, having you be a part of it. So then COVID comes.
Yeah.
And, was it 2020?
Yeah. It was probably I think it hit all of us mostly around February,
March. 2020 was when it all went down. I was actually talking about, was it 2020 when you had your accident?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I remember COVID, and then it all kind of feels like it was the same. What was the date that this
so it was
life altering?
August 9th of 2020.
Okay, and for those of you who are listening who aren't familiar with Ryan or Ryan's story, because I know we talked about it a lot on our social media, and the support around you is just, again, another example
It's wild,
of just when you think like, SOS is, I mean, they come out swinging for people. So just to frame it up for those of you who aren't familiar, so Ryan was basically shot driving in his car. And I will let you kind of tee up what you were doing in your car, why you were there, and kind of start to tell your story, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So pretty much that day, I was, it was just like any other Sunday. It was a Sunday. I was helping a couple friends like move this random piano because they're doing like some woodworking around their house. They had just got a new house and they were trying to do some things with it. Found it on a, like a Facebook marketplace thing. And I was like, all right, sure. He's got the truck and I got the muscle, hopefully. And we just, kind of went there, made it happen, had a few drinks with him, and then like left. So a couple hours go by, I'm just hanging out at the house. We had, because of COVID, we had a furlough. So I was like, just to fill in the cracks, I'll do like Uber Eats stuff. And I even went over to go see a friend of mine who's a coach at Bishop Hartley. So I ended up going over there. I was like, oh, cool. This is great. I have one delivery over there and I can go meet up with my boy. So I do that for a moment, go do that last delivery. And I'm like, this is kind of over in the worst area that I knew of because I had actually grown up over there and my parents actually ended up moving us out of that area.
Where was it?
It's like the Near East Side. So kind of close. It's like Livingston and James. Close, and then like if you get further east, it's kind of notorious for having the worst crime in the city, worser crimes in the city. So I was like, you know what, I'm doing this and I'm getting out of here. And I think it was Livingston and James where it kind of all happened. So I was driving home and didn't think anything of it. It's about 5-6 o'clock in the evening on a Sunday, and I'm just going about my way, minding my own business, and a car pulls up right beside me as I go past the light. And, don't think anything of it, but they just hover there for a bit. So I look over thinking that it's maybe someone I know, and have no idea who these people are. It's like two people in the car.
What do they look like?
So they look like they're having a bad day, right? Or something's going on in that car. Like they didn't look happy. They were looking over, they were staring, and I'm like, I have no idea who these people are. And, they looked younger. They looked younger than me for sure. And I was just like, I don't know. Did they think I'm somebody that I'm not? I probably look like the least threatening person there. I had a Columbus Crew hat on and glasses. And I'm driving in my car, just not thinking anything of it.
So I'm trying to get this mental picture too. So you were stopped together first.
I was stopped at a light. They weren't even next to me at the light. So
and they pull up.
Yeah. So after light turns green, we go through. I just, I'm going, and all of a sudden I just hear a horn and they pull up beside me. So I'm thinking like, oh, I don't know, maybe that's somebody I know, even though I don't know too many people in that side of town, but look over, I don't know him, so.
But when you looked over, you guys were both in motion.
Yes.
And then they were looking over at you.
Yeah.
Both of them. So you knew they were interested in what was happening with you, whatever that was.
Whatever it was, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, I just kept going. Eventually, like they just keep going back and forth. Like they'll pull up and then they'll stop and they'll kind of back off. At one point in time, they pull up, they honk their horn again, and then they pull over as they're trying to almost like, run you off the road. They're in the left lane. I'm in the right lane. And I'm just, at that point in time, I'm like, what the hell is going on? Visibly upset, telling them to back off, everything that you can, pretty much yelling at them with my window up, but they definitely know I'm visibly upset. So then shake my head, keep going about my way. They go back into their lane. And then I look over again and there's a driver's side pointing the gun. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on here. I back off and I look on the back of this car. I'm like, okay, so I have no idea what's going on. I look on the back, there's no license plate on the back. I'm like, that's not good. And then I try to get around him at another light.
There's no license plate on the car.
No license plate on the car, on the front or the back. So I'm like, in the back of my head, things are starting to turn. I'm like, this is a do dirt car. Like this is not theirs. They're just out joyriding, doing whatever they want to do in this thing. And I'm like, I should probably get away from these people, not knowing exactly who they are and what their intentions are.
But this is a busy road, correct? Like it's not easy for you and weren't there construction cones and things happening where you felt a little trapped into the...
Yeah. So like, I mean, I kept going. I mean, I went, if people that are familiar that are listening, like Livingston going past, Bexley, where Capitol and all that stuff is. If you're familiar with that area, like it goes from the Near East Side all the way down past that. And I'm just darting in between different cars trying to move around, and they're following me. They're telling me the entire way. And eventually I get to a point, it's like Miller-Kelton area. And there's another car that's kind of blocking the left lane. And I'm just trying to go straight. I'm trying to get to kind of where like Nationwide Children's is. I was like, if they're going to do something, they're going to be on camera. Right. And I couldn't get necessarily to it because I was going too quick, and that car was kind of stopped and stalled in that lane. So I just eventually just turned right on the kind of, I think it was either Miller or Kelton, one of the two that goes more north. And I'm like, all right, if they're still following me, I'm going to blow this light because it can take me over to 70. I can head downtown. And unluckily, there was a car right there, and there was a red light. And as soon as I tried to get over into the right lane, they were on top of me so much to where they pulled over to that left side, they unloaded on the car, and then they just pulled off. And that was the last portion of it. Like there were no real words exchanged throughout the entire process. It was just more of someone with bad intentions came up, they found somebody, and I ended up being that unlucky one. So
the windows, nobody had ever rolled their windows down and heard anybody verbally talking. It was more, okay. And so then how many rounds, like how many shots in the car?
If I had, I mean, he probably unloaded the whole clip on the car. I got hit 3 times, once in the leg, 2 upper body ones. One that was could have taken me out. It was a spinal hit. It gone through my trap and traveled, and then it had fractured facet on my cervical spine. And from all that, I was kind of realizing it at the time. I was like, what just happened there? I know that my windows got shot out, but what happened to me? Because at that point in time, I couldn't move my arms. And, then you start to think, you're like, I just got shot. It's kind of a wild, like out of body experience when it happens.
Well, so that's what, if you can, I'm trying to put myself there.
Yeah.
Because there's been a million times where you're in the car and you imagine things happening.
Yeah.
And I've imagined many things happening to me, especially with, years ago, the random guy that was shooting at cars on 270. Like it's a thought that has crossed my mind, unfortunately, multiple times, but it happened to you.
Yeah.
So when you heard, did you hear pops?
Oh yeah. Like you can hear it. And once the glass shattered, you kind of realized what was happening, right? Because at the time you're thinking as somebody's pulled, you're like, surely no one's going to do anything, right? Like you're just thinking that these are 2 kids that are probably just, blowing off some steam, trying to strut a little bit, right? But when it happens and you hear the glass, you hear the pop, you get a feeling, like it's just a certain feeling that came over you. Then you realize like what has happened, and then you're just trying to work through it at the time.
You remember all of it. You didn't black out.
No.
Did your life just like, what were you thinking at that exact moment? Like, I'm going to die?
Yeah, well, your mind kind of goes into a bunch of different dimensions, right? So I went into, it was kind of a bizarre chain of events for me in my mind. So I had realized that I had gotten hit. I realized I couldn't move because the one bullet that had hit me had the impact of it, even though it didn't hit my spine directly, the impact from it hit my facet on there, and then the shock from the bullet made me go temporarily paralyzed to where I couldn't move. And in my mind, I'm like, I can't do anything anymore. Like this is like the first thought was like, I'm stuck this way. And then the next part was like, am I going to live? And then the next part was just like, my car's still moving. Is this going to stop? Like, can I stop it? Is it going to stop itself? Because at that point in time, I didn't realize I had also gotten hit in the leg, and the leg that was on there on the brake had come off, and I couldn't put it back. Yeah.
So So not only has your car just been shot up, but now you're paralyzed
Yeah.
and your car is moving into oncoming traffic.
Yeah. So pretty much where it's an intersection that takes you over the bridge. It takes you over 70, Interstate 70. My foot's off of the brake and I'm just coasting. You know, like I'm going probably no more than 20 miles an hour. And I'm in here like going delirious, yelling that I've been shot, knowing that no one can hear me, but you're not really thinking too clearly at that point. Knowing that I couldn't move or anything. I could barely move my left arm and it was already on the steering wheel. So I was trying to move it around because I'm like, I had to stay in the fight kind of, because there was another car at the other side of that overpass and it was at a light. And then that light was also red. And there's cars coming off of the freeway have the green light. So I'm like, I just got to try to make it through this intersection now too. I've gone through one, now I have to go through this. And I see a car, like I can look over and see a car that's coming like onto or off of the freeway. And I push this arm a little bit just to get a little on the wheel. And so I don't hit the whole car. And I hit it, my airbag goes off and I get pushed back in the seat and then I really can't do anything else. And my hand is still on there. So I just I hit that car, I keep coasting and I see like, a bunch of kids playing over to the right. And I put my hand on there and I just kind of lean to the left because I see cars and grass. And I'm like, that's the only way this thing is going to stop. So that's eventually where I landed at the end of the whole thing.
So I assume there were other people that had heard the shots or saw the situation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So were they probably waiting? Did you have people rushing to your car?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't even remember all of what happened, but there was a woman who came out and, she was, obviously she was pretty terrified of everything because she had just heard this loud bang that hit her car. She sees some random guy in a random car and I'm just yelling, help, I've been shot. There's another guy who comes in. He actually opens the door because he sees that I can't really do anything with my hands. He opens the door. He actually kind of pulls me out and lays me down on the ground. In the meantime, I'm actually still scared. So I'm thinking that they're going to come back around because, in your head, you're thinking, they probably want to come around and see what happened. And if they didn't do it, they're probably trying to finish the job. At least that was kind of my head went into kind of defense mode. So then I'm trying to drag with one arm and I'm trying to tell him to get me behind the car in some way, just so we can shield ourselves if anything does happen again. It was kind of a wild feeling. You kind of get into this, you're saying like, the color of the car, the description of the guys. You just go into this all out, just, this is like kind of do or die mode. So
what was the description of the guys? The very specific description.
The one guy, he was dark-skinned, dreads probably down to his chin. The other guy was a little bit more light, almost more, I would almost say like maybe like Somalian-looking hair, was, up high, probably about 3 to 4 inches, up in the air. And they just look like young kids. They didn't look like, they couldn't have been much older than 20. If they were that, I think that they were young kids doing it.
And I thought you had mentioned when we talked previously, they had drugs in the car potentially, or did I dream that?
Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if there were drugs in the car. So like, knowing that, I remember talking to the cops and things. They're like, well, I saw them fumbling around with a bag, and I was assuming that was maybe money, drugs, something of that nature. And then I saw like, of course, him with the gun or whatnot, but I had seen a bunch of stuff in the back of the car as I had passed. So I'm like, I don't know what they got in this thing. It's, I think it was just something that they were using as a mode of transport, and they probably took it from somebody in order to, kind of keep a low profile.
So from the moment that the car stopped and you saw the first person that was there to help you, that had to feel somewhat of a relief.
Yeah.
But when did you realize, well, first of all, how long did it feel like it took for the ambulance to get there? Did it feel quick? Did it feel like forever?
It felt like, I think that time just kind of stood still for a while. It was, it was a time where I was looking around. I had seen everybody come out because they're like, what had happened?
Right.
Because, of course, you got kids playing in the neighborhood. It's a Sunday afternoon, really nice day. Everyone's just having a good time. And then all of a sudden, this comes into their area.
And you're just laying there bleeding, shot.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not necessarily where I was. It was not necessarily an area that was, a bad area, I would say. I would say it's a very communal area. I know some people that actually grew up in that spot, south of Maine, Deschler area. So, maybe a little rough, but I knew a lot of people over that way. Actually, my dad grew up not too far from that area too. My grandmother still lives there. So it's something that I was pretty familiar with. And, even though that stuff does happen there, it's not very frequent. And you're right next to Old Town, and Old Town, as we know, is kind of an up and coming, really nice, affluent area.
Yeah. So when did you finally realize you weren't going to die?
I actually didn't know. I didn't know. I was kind of like in my head, like, talking to some of the firemen and like the EMS. Because there was actually one of the ladies, she was EMS there, and she's like, you're gonna be okay. She's like, I don't see your vitals are pretty good, they're strong, but we got to get you stabilized. And they put me in a brace, they put me on a gurney type of thing, and they said, we're gonna take you here, we're gonna get you fixed up. So with her feeling that confident, that's when I kind of had a little bit of a sigh of relief. But at that point in time, I still was having troubles moving around. So it was like, you're going to live, but what's the damage going to be? So that was probably the thing that was in the back of my mind the most at the end of all of that.
So when you got into the hospital and they assessed, they got the bullets out. Like, help us with that process of when you were in the hospital. What did they have to do then?
So series of X-rays, series of scans. I went through a couple of different doctors, specialists, and probably the most crazy part about it all was once I was administered Integrant, the primary nurse that was taking care of me, Melissa was her name. She actually was an SOSer, and she realized who I was. She was like, "This is Ryan from here."
Let's just take a moment. Even in the most dire circumstances, you're still a quasi-celebrity, quasi-SOS celebrity.
the most magical part of that, if you could call it that, was like, it was super bizarre, right? So you had that. There was the lady that was administering my drugs. Her name is Elise Ryrock. I know her husband because we ran track together in college. And then she sees that name on the sheet. She's like, there's no way this is the same Ryan. She comes in, she sees it. She's like, oh my God. And she's like, Ryan? I'm like, oh, hi. Of course, at this point in time, I'm like,
how's your day?
Yeah. How are you doing?
Put on that SOS trainer persona.
Yeah. It's like, how you been? You been good? I'm like, day's been all right. It's pretty rough. Maybe. I don't know. She's like, your day, she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, you've been in this. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. It's bad. And like I couldn't move. I couldn't reach over and talk to her, or like even like high five, handshake, none of that stuff. Right. It was like, I am stuck here. And I think for her to see it, like I couldn't see it on the outside. I just knew how I felt, how awful I felt. But then like seeing other people's reactions sometimes, especially the ones that are close to you that or familiar with, like it starts to scare you after that point. So I kind of went through a couple of different reactions and chains of emotions, right? I went from feeling like okay to, seeing her face and seeing how bad it looked to her. A couple of the other doctors and the surgeons that came in, and they won't necessarily give you a reaction because I think that they're more so trained and probably even conditioned not to do that. Just more of like doing your job. So I think I was okay until I started seeing those different things, and then your mind starts to whirl like, all right, so I'm going to be okay, but I probably won't be able to do the things that I did before. And that was the one thing that I was thinking of. I was like, I can still use this arm. Maybe I can still play ball with the kids. Like you just get into these certain dimensions that don't necessarily make any sense. And even as you're thinking through it, you're like, what am I doing? What am I thinking about? Like I've gone through this traumatic event. It's almost like nothing shut off. It just went haywire.
So then what was the process with your spine and the bullets, and how did all of that? Obviously you're
Yeah.
good and praise God.
Yeah.
But what was it surgery? How did all
Yeah.
that?
So what was it? It was a series of, they did all those scans. The surgery took, I think they said somewhere around like 5 to 6 hours. And it was more so to remove the bullets there and also to perform a fusion on my spine too, because of where the impact happened and the fracture that had happened. They wanted to stabilize my neck. They didn't think that on its own it would heal on its own. And the fusion was my best bet to have, fairly good mobility and, to be able to go about an everyday normal life afterwards. So at first they weren't going to remove the bullets because the one in my neck that was the baddest, the worst one, that was on top of an artery and not even, I think they said it was maybe an eighth of an inch away from both that artery and my spine. So, I mean, it nestled right in between it. They're like, we may not want to take it out. And for me, I was just like, can we please? Because it's like, I don't want any of this stuff in me. So, I mean, between that one, there was a graze on my shoulder, and then there was a bullet in my leg. And luckily that didn't fracture anything. It was more of a soft tissue injury there. They were able to take everything out within that 5 to 6 hours. And then afterwards, I was in the hospital for 2 more days, went through therapy just to, kind of test out walking, balance, and all that stuff, keeping my equilibrium and whatnot. So, a lot of trying to stand, trying to walk a few steps here or there, trying to pick up certain things. Because at one point in time, I couldn't even pick up a pencil. Like, it was even hard just to do that. So, a couple of days of that, a few weeks even afterwards, I had to get, driven to a therapist for probably a month afterwards. Had another occupational therapist a month after that too, just to kind of get fine motor skills down. And, eventually after that second month, I was able to get my neck brace off because I was wearing that like 24 hours a day. And I was super uncomfortable. And then eventually I just started walking kind of more so on my own with a cane. And then now I'm good to go. Yeah, tip top.
What was it like when you first saw your kids after this? I can imagine this entire time this is going on, whether you're, in the road rage situation, pre-bullets, to when the bullets popped, to afterwards rolling up onto that lawn. I can imagine you thinking, will I ever see those 2 kids again?
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of the biggest deal even at the time. Because I remember talking to a couple of the EMS, the police. I was like, so this, like in my head, like it even sounded crazy, but I was like, so this means we're supposed to have mezzi tonight. I haven't had mezzi tonight with the kids. And I was like, can I come home? And, thinking that in your head, that was also probably the first thing that I said to them when I first got on scene. I was like, will I be okay? And I was like, can I come home tonight? We're supposed to have dinner tonight at a place we've never been. And after I got home too, it was one of the things where I told my parents, I was like, could you take the kids because it's going to be hard for me to see them? And, I didn't want them to see me in a certain way. And because, kids have questions, they have multiple questions when they see anything that's different, especially if they see a parent that's different too. So I think that the one thing when I first saw them that kind of made me feel some type of way was, they didn't want to hurt me. They saw me and they were afraid to kind of come near me. And that never happens. Like most of the time, my son's always punching me whenever I walk in. That's our way of saying hello.
That's your love language.
Yeah. My girl, she's sweet. She's always giving me a hug whenever I first come in. So whenever that happened and I didn't get that same routine that we've had all the time and seeing them not be so unsure, it wears on you mentally, and you try to be, you always try to be strong for your kids and try to reassure them that things are okay. But, even after I didn't see them for about 3 or 4 days afterwards and just talking to them on the phone, once they saw me, that really even trying to be strong for him, it really kind of messed with your head, and it was to the point where I literally had to like, wear a hood or, just because you were kind of in tears because you made them feel scared in a way. And I know that it's not a normal way of thinking through that, but I think sometimes you, as being their protector and being the person who's always going to be consistent in how you are with them, and I couldn't be, it makes you feel like pretty low, right? So
I don't think there's a normal way of dealing with something so outrageously, potentially life change. Life ending. There are multiple doors of sliding doors there that could have opened, and I just thank God that you're sitting here with me, just intact and healthy. It's amazing. But I think it's a good segue into when something like this happens to someone, the physical, obviously the physical aspect takes priority because it's life or death, right? What are the physical, what's the physical damage? Is he going to live? Yes. Okay. Is he going to walk? Okay. Yes. And then you're in physical therapy, and next thing you know, you're nursing yourself back to physical health.
Right.
And what you can't see is the mental, the emotional, the life-altering side of this.
Right.
That also has the wound that has to heal over time. And that mental and emotional wound can heal in a real funky way sometimes. Like, to me, knowing your personality, you are the most, at least from where I sit, you're the most steady Eddie. Like your hat there, Velvet Hammer. They call you smooth jazz at SOS because you just have this very grounded, consistent. You just seem like you get life. Now I know that I have a 10,000-foot view, and I guarantee you have moments where you're pissed and you're negative and you're all these things. But talk through, how did this impact you in terms of, like, are you jaded? Are you mad? Are you a mixture of that and like grateful? Like, what are your mental and emotional, like, what's that path look like?
So I think even because, I talk to a therapist about this all the time, but it changes the way you see or you view life and like the people around you, right? So I'm definitely a lot more cautious, and there's certain things that I don't want to do. I avoid, especially being on the road, right? Because in the road where it happened, all that stuff, I don't like to be too close to anyone, on the freeway, on the road, period. I don't like anyone hovering around me. So it definitely puts you in more of a defense mode. You start to see, being a part of the darker side of things, you start to see it more, and you start to not necessarily seek it out, but you try to identify certain places and scenarios where like that could potentially happen. And you definitely gauge and look around more, as a, like in a defense sort of way. A lot of anger, right? I think a lot of people that would go through something like that, where you really didn't do anything to initiate anything like that. It was just a bad, it was just that day, and some people tend to say like, oh man, you're lucky that you're alive or whatnot. You're lucky, this stuff happened. I was just like, man, I think that in my head, that's initially what you would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense to say. But there's over 1 million people in this city. And on that day and on that time, I was the quote unquote lucky one. I was like, I don't know if I'm necessarily lucky. I wouldn't call it luck because I got picked that day. But I would say I was definitely fortunate that it was not as bad as it could have been. Even some of the doctors and the surgeons are like, if it would have been one way or another, like a fraction of an inch or one way, you either would have been in a wheelchair or you would have been gone. And, on top of all that, I think as I was going through the process of rehab and all that, and working through this with a therapist, I pretty much got knocked back. My cousin, and I don't know if I told you this, but my cousin, almost a month to the day afterwards, he was shot and killed. And he's another guy who, he minds his own business. He runs his own business as well. He works at a barbershop that's on the east side. He was gunned down in front of his house. And he's another person who, doesn't bother anyone. As a matter of fact, there was something on the news about him, and there was an outpouring of emotions about it. Like had a balloon release, and people talked about how great of a guy he was because I knew him. I grew up with him, and he was a great guy. And seeing that happen on top of like what happened to me a month earlier, going to his funeral with a neck brace on, in a sling, pretty much going through the same violence, right? Or the same somewhat of a scenario where you're just picked out.
That just gave me my whole entire body. I just had a physical reaction to that because on its own, having a cousin that you grew up with and you played with and you were super close with, that on its own is so, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
But then here you are in this insane situation yourself, and you're walking through your cousin's funeral that so easily could have been your funeral.
Yeah. You almost feel guilty.
Well, right. You probably had survivor's guilt. You probably had this feeling of, thank God I'm here. And then you felt guilty for thinking that. And then I can't even imagine, Ryan.
Because you just, I didn't want to stay there for too long. I was there an hour before anyone else was because I just wanted to have a moment with him. And, looking at his mom and dad in the face and just seeing how hurt they were. And then just thinking like, why couldn't he survive this? Why did I survive this and he didn't?
How old was your cousin?
He was 24 at the time.
And what was going on outside of his house at the time when he got shot?
He was just going to work. It was a day, I think they said it happened early in the morning. From what a witness said, there was a car that was kind of just hovering around. And then it just stayed on a block a little bit away from where he was or where his house was. And he comes out of the house, tries to, he's getting into his car because he goes and I think he's probably on the way to opening the shop. He's got appointments in the morning. And someone gets out of the car that's down there. They run up on him, they shoot him, and they leave. He ends up making it into his car, but he eventually dies in his car. They pronounce him dead at the hospital.
The person got out of their car to shoot him?
Yeah, they got out. They raced towards him. They shot him. And from what the report that I saw said, they got out, shot him, got in, left. Nobody had any idea about this, about who he was. There were a bunch of things that were thrown around. Eventually, actually, not too long ago, about 3 or 4 months ago, the U.S. Marshals found him down in South Carolina. So I'm assuming that this person was probably into some bad stuff, even before all this. This is probably just another addition to how, horrible that person was. But, they eventually found this guy, which does leave you with some closure, but, kind of going through all that stuff and thinking about, even I remember a text message that he sent me when I was in the hospital, like, hey man, he's like, I'm going to come see you. As soon as you're well, we're going to hang out again. It's like, it's been too long. And it had been a long time. He's got a little girl around the same age. And he's a great dad to her. He's great with her. They had actually just gone on a trip to Disney World maybe a year before that. But seeing all that stuff, it just kind of conjured up like even more emotions. You're making it through this process. Things are getting better. And then you kind of get wiped out again a month later.
I just can't imagine.
Yeah, you kind of go into you just don't know what makes sense anymore, right? Because, you go through something that's traumatic and life-altering, and then somebody who's close to you does the same, goes through that and doesn't make it. And, you get to a point where like the emotions, they don't really hit you. You just kind of more shake your head because you can't believe it.
One more question about your cousin. Did they discover that this guy, did he know your cousin, or was this completely random?
That I don't know. I would imagine that they did know each other to some extent. From what I've heard, and there's multiple stories because everyone has their story about how it happened. From what I know, they did know each other somehow. I don't know how it was. I don't know if it was through the barbershop that he worked at. I don't know if it's outside of there. But from what I've heard, they had some type of contact with each other, and I think that's how they were able to narrow down suspects. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So fast forward, all this happened in 2020. We're
Mm-hmm.
now in the beginning of 2023.
Yeah.
Have you had therapy, not physical therapy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for the space in between your two ears?
Yeah.
Have you been able to, like, any medication? Is that necessary? Do you have post-traumatic stress disorder? Do you have moments where you get overcome with fear and anxiety? What's all that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think with a lot of times when this happens to people, and it happens quite a bit. I mean, there's a lot of people that are, gun violence survivors that are, floating through society. And you wonder how they're doing, or sometimes people don't. Some people are just like, well, you survived, so you
should be happy.
You should be happy and you should be fine.
Let's not deal with all the multiple layers of being in that traumatic situation.
Yeah. So, there's an ongoing battle in your mind, right? Like there's an ongoing thing of, every scenario is a bad scenario. And, waking up with, terrible nightmares, that went on for about 3 to 4 months afterwards, like reliving the entire thing. Cause it was not an event that I was, unconscious or knocked out for. It was something that I experienced to the fullest. Like I was never, out of it at any point. I got to see and feel and, go through all that. And I think that even just going through the rehab, the certain hurt and the certain pains and knowing that, it could have been worse and thinking through all that and thinking like, is there something else that I could have done to do better? And, talking to a therapist I even still talk to her now. Her name is Stephanie Krznaric. And she works for the city and going with, she experiences or not experiences, but works with people that have experienced, violence and any type of violence, whether it's, domestic, gun violence, any of that nature. Talking with her through all this stuff has been like an amazing grace for me. Because it's hard to work through on your own. Like, you think in your head and, like with me being a person that doesn't like to lay my pressures or any of my problems on anyone else, it was very hard for me to open up. But she was really patient with me and she really worked with me to, kind of let me know that this is not something that you can or should work through on your own. And you need somebody who's, trained in it or somebody just even has an outlet to talk to, about any of your problems. I mean, that's why we talk to our friends and things, right? So, a lot of the therapy, I was diagnosed with PTSD. Some of the things that I go through, like some of the scenarios in life that you go through, she's helped me find ways to be grounded by them and find certain ways to kind of calm down the anxiety and some of those thoughts and instances where I do feel, out of control or just unsafe, right? So,
yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that you're not only that you took that leap to get the therapy, but that you still have a good relationship, and when you need it, you can go and get the help that you need.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was there a moment where, like after the hospital, like you've been able to run again or something? You're like, damn, I'm running.
Yeah.
Like this is because you mentioned this early on about, you were a pretty big track, like you're a pretty talented dude, right?
Yeah.
So like running is a thing for you.
Yeah. I mean, I was okay.
What do you mean you were okay?
I was good.
You went to Ohio Northern, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And
I was good.
Let's talk about it. What did you do in track? I don't even know the deets of, I know you were fast.
So I did long jump. I did a little bit of very slight amount of triple jump. But I was on every sprint relay I could probably be on, played football there. Shout out to the Polar Bears. We did some pretty cool stuff there. I remember I even played football there, played all 4 years of football there.
What position did you play?
Defensive back. And then I did very little specialty returning, but mostly defensive back. Played on special teams. I was supposed to be like the skill guy. So I did a lot of that. I was, we had a good time. I mean, Northwest Ohio, if anyone's ever been up that way, there's not too much going on, but we made the best of it.
Oh, I've partied Ohio Northern multiple times. I've had my share of parties up there. My husband went there.
Yeah. I know, because we talk about old, old football stories and people that we may have known in crossing, and like all the times at the only bar really to go to, it was the Regal Beagle at the time.
I've been to the Beagle, baby. I've been to the Beagle.
Yeah,
now I haven't been kicked out of the Beagle, but I've been kicked out of multiple other bars.
Because I don't think they'd be like, well, you're all right by us. They let anything kind of fly there.
Yeah.
So it was a fun time.
Yeah. So, well, I'm thinking, so with all of this trauma and this situation that you would never ask for and you would never want ever, but it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I also think there are positive things that come out of these types of traumas. At least that's been my experience, whether it's as simple as a shift in your paradigm of, man, like I'm not guaranteed one breath.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm going to maximize my time here. I'm going to shift the way I'm thinking. All this bullshit that doesn't matter, it kind of sharpens your pencil and just dials you right into what's important.
Right.
Have you felt those things as well?
Oh, I felt that pretty much right when I got out of the hospital, because I was just like, I went to that dark place, and in my head I was kind of like, I'm just going to be like this person that can't do everything that they did before. Right. Or you kind of get down in the dumps in your mind. You're like, I can't afford to do that. I got people that are expecting me to do what I've always done. And I remember even like, I am kind of stubborn. I'm very stubborn when I want to be. I had gotten out of the hospital, and they were like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I want to do the same thing I do every Thursday. I'm like, I want to get my cup of coffee at my favorite spot, Upper Cup Coffee. It's in Old Town.
I like the name.
Yeah. And it's like, I go there.
Shout out to Upper Cup.
Shout out to Upper Cup. I was like, I'm going to do that because I do that every Thursday. And I'd missed one. So I was like, I have to go. And I went there, neck brace, hospital gown, didn't care. And they were all really concerned. I was like, I'll tell you guys later.
Wait, rewind.
Yeah.
So you walked in with your gown and your neck brace with no preface. They had no idea. You're like, we'll talk later.
Yeah. Like I was like, I'm good.
Just give me my coffee.
And they're just like, you can't leave us this way, And I'm just like, I got to. I was like, I got to go home. I got to rest. So went home. Didn't even go home to rest because, of course, I'm like, grass needs cut. So
Ryan,
then,
tell me you didn't go out in your robe with your neck brace.
Ass out, in my gown, neck brace on. My mom's got she's like, this is how ridiculous and stubborn my son is. Is taking video of me the entire time.
Is there any way we could get a clip of that?
It might be somewhere. I mean, if she probably wouldn't be too she wouldn't resist putting that up.
If you can get it, I will put it as a part of this because I feel like people need to see that image.
Yeah, they're like, good Lord, this kid. Like, this is who I raised. That's probably what she was thinking in her head.
In your head, you were thinking, and going back to that sharpening the pencil moment, you're thinking, I get to mow my lawn.
Yeah,
this
I really
is
was.
Amazing. Every blade of grass. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying is, why does it take something so unthinkable to get you dialed in on that other side sometimes?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really, there is a lot of things that, I kind of took for granted that even just like little stuff like that, like COVID even. I mean, hell, during COVID, that was the first span of 2 or 3 years where I was just like, I had a fully functioning nose throughout the entire year. No cough, no none of this, right? And like just the small misery that you have with that, right? And then I go through something where it's like, I didn't know if I could walk again. I didn't know if I could pick up a pot of coffee again. Like all these things that I enjoyed. Like I was actually able to pick up the coffee that I got at Upper Cup and actually drink it. And that was a big win for me. And, before it was hard for me to write with a pencil and all that stuff. I was able to write on the tip, right? Like that was a big deal for me just to be like, man, my arms, they're moving how I want them to. My legs, I can walk into this place. I can mow my own grass. I can do the things that I did before.
This whole, in Gretchen and I in System of Strength, one of our big things is you don't have to come to class. You get to come to class. And that one mind shift, just if everybody out there who didn't want to work out in the morning or didn't want to do the thing that they need to do, if they could just make themselves step back and go, you know what, self, I get to do this today. I don't have to. And there are so many people that would give anything to get to do it.
Right.
And it's that shift it just means everything.
I mean, that's what keeps me coming back week after week, every Saturday, people were like, why do you wait? Why do you just, you work on your Saturdays? Like, you just got to understand. I was like, these people have been with me for a very long time. They've been with me through the worst moment in my life. None of this has worked to me. It wasn't work before this. It wasn't work afterwards. It was always something that was like more of an opportunity that I get to do.
Speaking of, let's take a minute for the SOS community. Really.
Yeah.
So we find out that this happened and immediately it's the calls, the text, like we're rallying, our boy needs help.
Yeah.
Like it was just Lock City. Just like with Matt Wyan or any other situation, we like our heads pop up and we're like, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
Which is, to me, one of the most badass things about SOS. Everybody out there knows that. Like you can get goosebumps thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
So the word spread. We're like, we need to raise money and we need to rally this guy, send him cards, send him your love. I mean, how did you feel wrapped in a freaking weighted SOS blanket?
I felt like it was almost like if you needed reassurance that you were doing the right thing for people, like I feel like I got it. And even more so on that, I was just like, I got a whole community behind me. Like you guys gave me the juice to keep going through my therapy, to keep going through all the stuff that I wanted to do. Like I remember talking to my boss in my full-time job, and he's like, well, you think you're going to be back in 3 months? He's like, take as much time as you need. I was like, take as much time as you need. And he was just, kind of like, what do you think you're going to do? I was like, you got to understand, like, I have a lot of people and I have a community. Like, I'm probably going to go back to my other job before I go back to you, right? I want to go back and coach and teach more so than I want to go back to my full-time job, because it was such an impact. Like, I remember when, Gretchen came over and she, her and Darcy and Matt and all of them came over and they told me like everything that had happened and like the money that had been raised. And I was kind of like in disbelief. I was like, this all happened for me because they felt like I had made such an impact. And this community, I mean, it's done it multiple times. So I shouldn't have been, it wasn't a surprise really, but I think it was a surprise that it happened to me, right? Because you're just thinking like, oh, I'm just doing my job. I enjoy doing this. But they saw somebody from their community that was in need and they gave me it all, the cards I still have, I still read them, Which, yeah. Like, I think even before you told me that I was coming on this show, or when you told me I was coming on this show, I remember I was like, let's just read back through those again. Because it's just always good to come back to.
Yeah.
And it's always a good reminder of like, what you've gone through and the people that care about you. Because I was, like you said, just wrapped in a blanket. Like I was overwhelmed when she told me. And all the cards and all the stuff that you guys had, written and the voicemails, the text messages. I tried to read. I was like, man, I hope I get back to everybody. Like
you got back to me.
Yeah.
Because when people are going through stuff like that, you're like, God, I don't want to bother them. It's this balance. And I think from my own experience going through hard times, my biggest piece of advice to someone who doesn't know what to do or to say is do something.
You're right.
Regardless of whether you think it's going to be too much or annoying. So I was like, ding, 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 right, ding, ding, ding. And you're, when I would see your response, though, it would make me feel like, he's there. He's good.
Yeah.
Like it was just and it's so hard when someone goes through something like that. And you and I don't speak on a daily basis, right? We're in each other's sphere. So I can't be the one to be like, hey, Ryan, all the time.
Right.
But you're so in my heart. You're so, it's just a crazy experience when someone that you care about goes through something so
terrible, right? It's I think when it does happen like that, to your point, like you just don't know exactly what to do. And, on the other side of things, that person that's going through it, they may feel pretty alone, right? Because like you're alone in your head, you're alone with your thoughts. No one's in your head with you. And you don't have that distraction from somebody else reaching out to you saying like, hey, how are you doing? Hey, like, let's do this. Let's take your mind off of it by doing this. Anything else, anything that you can, throw into your life as a distraction or even just as a notification that like, hey, we're looking out for you.
Yeah. And I just can't emphasize enough to people, always do something.
Yeah.
Because even when your heart is there, but if you don't reach out, even if it's a heart.
Yeah.
always do something.
It's like, I tell you, it's a lot like, you can be in quicksand in your mind, but those people that reach out to you,
they're pulling you up.
They pull you, and it was a lot like that for me. I felt like, I was kind of getting pulled down by, the self-doubt and all the things that you feel after you go through something like that. And whenever, I remember I would even, if I ever felt bad about myself in these last few years, I've been like, I think I'm okay. Oh, this is good.
No, it's true. And it's just a testament of who you are.
Yeah.
And it's a testament of the SOS community. So if you're out there listening, and I know you are SOSers, you're badass, you show up, we see it, we need it, we need more of it. And we just thank you for believing in System of Strength and what we're about. It really does mean everything. And if you didn't know it, just hearing Ryan say it should be a reinforcement.
Every one of those. I even look back through the GoFundMes that you guys put out there.
Yeah.
Like any of the comments there, any of the, like I have all the notes. I have them in a bag, in a box that's locked to make sure no one but me can take them, right?
Doesn't that say something? I mean, and it's not even like the financial part of it is important because unfortunately, when something like this happens, there's always a financial hardship that comes with it. So for us to be able to help with that is amazing.
Yeah.
But then the actual word, but the words of encouragement, the actual like badassery being put to you, like, hey, Ryan, this is how I feel about you.
Yeah.
On a normal day, I would never tell you this because I wouldn't even be thinking about it. But this is how I feel about you.
Yeah.
And that is energy and that is badassery. And it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I put out a post, just a random, I was going through my, you go through, take a trip down memory lane on your photos on your phone. And I started getting all ooey gooey. And so I did this little 10 years of SOS and I posted it on here. And Darcy Wyan, she's like, I'm in tears over these lemonade stand photos of Matt. You remember the lemonade stand that those kids did for Matt?
Yeah.
And it's like, so I sent her onto her phone, like some photos of this, just these kids holding up these signs that like, Wyanade and all these things. It's like those types of things, like that is just everything. And that's the SOS community. And in fact, that was a little kid.
Right.
That was an SOS kid that was like, hey mom, can we do this? I mean, it's a really, really, really amazing group of humans to be a part of.
Kids, that's the thing. Even the kids have an impact with this.
Yeah.
Like I remember even like one of our neighbors had came and they're like, well, does this mean you can't play ball anymore? And I'm like, well, maybe for a while I can't play. They're like, we'd really like you to play ball. I hope you feel better. And they gave me a hug on my leg. Like probably the most, I don't know. I like even more so like, cause I was holding my two and then everyone kind of like just wrapped me up in like this little baby blanket of kids. Right. And you're just like, good Lord, if I don't get up off of my ass and make sure that I attack this and I get going again, it's like I want to play with all these kids playing ball. We're gonna have like whatever going on. We're gonna have like a I think even later on that week, we had in Clintonville where we live. There was a block party a few blocks down. I was like, I'm gonna go because some of those kids are gonna be there.
Yep.
We set up like I couldn't do very much. I was using like one arm, but I was like. Playing baseball and we were out in the street and I was just hitting them balls to, fly up and catch or whatnot. And I was like, this is fun. These are some of the kids that
this is it.
They were also batting in my corner. And actually one of the kids in the community, their mother goes to SOS too. So, shout outs to them. That was a great moment too. And the kids can have like a huge impact.
Mm-hmm. And kids just are adults in waiting. It's next thing you know. So you start teach your children well, and you teach them early and young, and the world will be a much better place.
Yeah, they make an impact. I couldn't tell you how much that one moment too, knowing that like she, like the mother of that kid had seen my story, probably told their kid about it because they probably had questions, and then they embraced me that way. Yeah. Like that's pretty wild.
Well, Ryan, I think it's very brave of you to share your story. I know it's probably not an easy story to tell, but thank you, because I do think that I know a lot of people out there care about you, and we're probably also curious, what happened and how are you doing today? And I think that gives a good analysis of what's going on there. But before we end, do you still do you're very talented with woodworking. Do you still do that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like actually, funny story. I was trying to come up with more of a name that fits more with, doing woodworking. And where did I find it? Found it from you.
Oh, really?
Found it from both of you. Because I was like, they call me Smooth Jazz and the Velvet Hammer. And I'm like, Velvet Hammer. That sounds great. Let's do that.
That's amazing.
So literally came up with this brand
all
that
so
stuff.
Is that your logo?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. So
if people want, let's give a little, like if somebody wants like a gift or they want a cornhole, give me like a 30-second spiel on what it is and then how they can get a hold of you.
So I don't have too many outlets just yet, but I do have a YouTube channel. It's the Velvet Hammer. And then I also have an Instagram page that I made, kind of pivoted to that. It's the Velvet Hammer, but it's called the Vel Hammer.
Ooh, I like that.
And it's just anything that I make, just a guy with his tools in his backyard trying to make up something and, in his garage trying to figure out what's the next thing that you're going to make for the house or for your friends. Like I make a lot of like smaller trinkets. I made for a friend's wedding. I made a wooden bow tie for suits. Just anything I can get my hands on there. Like someone wanted but it was like a bench for their baby's room. They had a kid named Anthony, and it was a toddler stool. And I was like, well, never made one of those. Let's try it out.
That's amazing. Do you have photos of everything up on your Instagram?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you're out there looking for some sort of fun, creative, thoughtful gift, I would highly recommend going to Ryan's Instagram, and he's very customizable. So if you have an idea or a thought, Ryan can help bring it to reality, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So Ryan, we're going to wrap up here. Mm-hmm. We've talked about a lot. My heart is full. My cup is full. So if you're out there today and you are experiencing any kind of trauma, PTSD, any kind of domestic violence of any kind, please reach out, whether it's just in my DM. Ryan, we can put out Stephanie's information potentially. Mm-hmm. If anybody's looking for a therapist, I have several in my back pocket.
Yeah.
You're not alone. Mm-hmm. And if you're hurting, you need to come out and somebody can reach out their hand and help you.
Yeah.
All right,
even
guys.
Just reach it out on my stuff too, right? If you want to.
Yep. So Ryan's personal, you're what? A kindred dissonance? Mm-hmm. What does that mean, by the way?
So it means that, a lot of, kindred means, I think it's always or the same and then difference.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of times in a lot of walks in life, which I guess ironically coming through what I've gone through, you get a little bit more of that too. Like there's a lot of different walks of life, but we all have the same things we want, right? We want to be cared for. We want to be loved. We want to share good times, no matter where you come from. Whether whatever your background is, whatever your religion is, whatever part of the world you live in. It was kind of more one of those things where someone could feel, what I'm putting out there, right? So it's just random things that I do throughout the day. So it was like. Most of it was primarily making things, but then some of it was just, going to a game. Some of it's just enjoying a sunrise, some enjoying a sunset. Some things that we can all enjoy, no matter where we come from.
I love that. So you can find Ryan at Kindred Dissonance. He makes it a little challenging, though. You have to I'm like, wait, Kindred Dissonance. But that's his Instagram handle. So even if you just want to reach out and give Ryan a high five, a heart, just tell him how you're feeling, anything. We would love to hear from you. All right, Ryan, kisses. Fist bumps. Thank you so much, but I love you dearly.
Love you too. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Please follow me on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And until next time, keep moving.